one of the gifts of life, but especially life when you're discerning and paying attention, is that the people that you've been needing and calling for show up. And I love that about life. Sometimes we're not being very conscious, so we may not notice that they've shown up. And I want to say for our presenter that's coming, that our dear community member, Carrie, was the first one that started sending some clips, video clips. And I can't remember the one that I saw first. It wasn't the TED Talk. It was actually something else. And I was like, who is that? There was just like a certain light and energy that was coming off of Nalo in this panel. It's a whole panel of folks, but Nalo was the only one that I remembered. And I think it has to do with their answering their own call, and being full up in it. So we are blessed today, and I'm looking forward to having some of my really roots that have been holding on to stuff that's ready to be let go of. I'm looking forward to having those shaken and having that impacted dirt fall away and feeling some new ways of being and understanding and seeing. So Nalo describes self as possibilities strategist, a first grade teacher, and a consultant for community praxis on justice. On justice, accountability, and relationship building. Nalo was born in Maryland and raised between New York and DC before investing in gender, masculinity, and love scholarship in college. In their spare time, they enjoy spending time at home with their wife, Adrian, and turtle, Nalito, or little Nalo. Nalo's personal loves include reading, writing, playing piano, and basketball. We can hang out, Nalo. I love all of those things too. So let us welcome Nalo to take us on a trip today. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so grateful to everyone who worked hard to put this together. The team is so communicative and sweet and kind, and I'm so thankful that and humbled that you even thought of me. As I practice in this work, it is a process of my own life as a masculine person, so a lot of it is rooted in data that's not so much me exploring this particular thing outside myself, but also as a masculine identified person, that I'm also learning and living within the things that I am exploring and sharing with you today. So thank you. Huge shout out to my wife, Adrian, who gives me all the feedback and keeps me humble too. I love her. I want to make sure I say that. So I see as I'm navigating the gallery, I'm seeing some Twitter friends, I'm seeing some scholar friends, I'm seeing some Instagram followers. I saw a cute baby that Dave had. It's just a sweet space that seems to be here, and it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. How I want to orient to this space is important to me because this topic draws all the opinions. It draws the contrarians. It draws people who want to see masculinity dismantled and thrown away. What is the utility of masculinity? Why do we need it? I think all those are valid questions. They're questions I've had to sift through. I want to make sure that you know I don't come to this space seeking to or claiming to have all the answers for you. I do come into this space to facilitate a room for all of us to imagine what those possibilities look like together. That's important to me to name because of power dynamics that I'm also going to speak about today. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, let's see. All right, if you can see my screen, you might give me a thumbs up real quick. Okay, awesome. I'm seeing some thumbs up. That's what I like. That's what I like. Awesome, awesome. All right, so Masculiminality. This is language I've created to talk about the state of being between and existing within multiple experiences of gender at one time. And the reason I have to use that kind of framework is because I'm speaking from a very present, right now version of how we're experiencing masculinity. There are so many stories and cultural happenings that create so many different opportunities for masculinity to be analyzed across cultures, across genders, across races. And I want to be mindful of all of that. That's why I do not come as an expert. I come with an offering. And that's important to distinguish. Again, masculinity is this, masculiminality is the state of being between and creating within multiple experiences of gender in one lifetime, while manifesting, and if any of you are anything like me, recognizing the perception side of masculinity, most comfortable on those masculine edges of the prism. And I use gender prism as language as on the edge of something, reflecting light in every direction, right? Like we know how spectrum work, but we know prisms reflect endlessly in every direction, but it exists from the reflection off of the edge, the place we don't often go comfortably. And I think that that's important. In this particular space, I'm also going to talk about some hard things, right? Some things that we might not want to talk about in a particular way. I know that when I do any work on masculinity presenting in the past, it has been, I get men who don't think that I have the know-how to speak to this topic. But it's the experience of the in-between for me that I think matters. I'm the only data I need to talk about masculinity from my perspective. You are the only data you need to speak to masculinity from your perspective. Now, what we often do.
Sorry.
They get the apps.
Yeah.
They get the thing. They get the dessert. Like, is he learning how to eat?
Can I get you to mute your mic, friend? That's going to be helpful to me if everyone can keep their mics muted, because I don't have the view or control to navigate that, but that's all right. For me as a masculine person, thinking about masculiminality, that in-between space is crucial because, a person like me is not man enough to use the language, not woman enough to be considered the ideal perception of what is claimed as a woman, especially presentation-wise, or not human enough. Queer and trans people's masculinities, nuanced masculinities, those masculinities that don't make sense to us, so we feel like we need to have control over who's in the club and who ain't. It is important that we navigate relinquishing the control and being accountable to our own power. So we're going to jump right in it, y'all. Now, boundaries. Belonging is a practice. That is a staple for me. A friend of mine, Prentice Hemphill, says, boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. I must be able to preserve my dignity and respect yours at the same time. Multiple freedoms can exist at once. Multiple visions can exist at once. I'm not here to be in opposition to anyone or anyone's ideas. I'm here to share mine. I want to make that clear. I can't tell you what I've been through to have to make it that clear, but I want to make it clear. So some boundaries for me when I present: we're grounding in our own experiences as data. So please practice mindfulness when you're speaking of others. That is deeply important to me. We do not want to expose or cause harm to anyone outside this space. It could be, you could be speaking to a particular experience you have, but be mindful of naming, be mindful of giving explicit details. If it is a public story like a celebrity and you want to give that as an example or something, I'm happy to hear it. But I want us to still practice a deep level of mindfulness around speaking of others, especially in a time where social media is readily available. I would like for us to require the same respect of ourselves that we do of others, especially how we want to be handled in conflict. Again, coming to this space will bring different ideas. It will bring conflict because we are all socialized to know somebody got to be right, somebody got to be wrong, somebody got to make sense, somebody got to sound not like they not making sense. And though those are not the ways that I particularly navigate or orient towards thinking or ideas, I do know that is still a part of our culture as humans. So I just want us to be mindful of that as well. Third, I'm not an expert. I'm just a curious human like you. I believe that expert is language that tries to distinguish a particular hierarchy of knowing, and that ain't me. Okay? I want to be clear about that. It ain't me. I'm here because I have spent my life navigating a particular body of work. It has offered me some exploration, and I offer that to the people who I facilitate with. This space may not have all the answers you need or even want to hear. But guess what, y'all? That's the beauty of multiple visions being in conversation in the same space at the same time. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. I believe that it is important to learn what it means to be uncomfortable with ideas we don't agree with, because those multiple freedoms can't exist at the same time. And lastly, but definitely not least, triggers and trauma responses are always possible. And please feel free to step away to take care of yourself as you need. That is the number one for me, because I want to be sure that I cannot create a safe space. I do not claim to have ever created a safe space. I'm brave enough, just like you, to show up in conversation with the ideas. All right? I wanted to make sure we got to that. Trigger warnings. Now, we are talking about masculinity. We are talking about the reality of masculinity. That may bring up responses about violence, harm, sexual assault, and abuse, which is part of my story. We will talk about this afternoon. Church and religion. I mean, as a preacher's child, if you anything like, if you know the experience of religious indoctrination, you know, it works for some, it doesn't for others, okay? So I want to make sure that I'm mindful about that. I'm going to talk about those. Patriarchal masculinities. You will find out why I put that as a trigger warning. But we all, have experienced the impact of patriarchy in some way or another. Men, I'm not in any way seeking to take masculinity away from you. I'm seeking to expand it in a more holistic view. That is important. I'm not in opposition to any of you. Okay? So, whatever feelings you might have, feel free to share them if you need to. But I want to make sure that we're being mindful of ourselves, because we are sharing space, not taking space. Death is another trigger warning. Death will be something that comes up in the keynote portion of my segment later today. And lastly, limited language. For me, I want to be clear. All my pronouns are any pronouns used respectfully. I do not have, I don't have anything around how people orient to me. I do expect that if we're speaking of others or to others, or I want to piggyback off blah, 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 that we are using their pronouns. So before you do speak in this space, please do introduce yourself, say your pronouns, and how you'd like to be referred. The language is limited, talking about masculinity anyway, in English or any Western conceptualization of language. It is limited. We are creating within the bounds that we have and creating new language daily. So let's be gentle with each other. All right. Who am I? Why should you be even listening to me, right? Neo News said that, she saw some clips of my work and she was like, who is that, right? So I'm going to give you the opportunity to know a little bit of who I am. And this is probably the most vulnerable I have ever planned to be in a workshop ever. And that's important for me to note because I want to expose a couple things before I begin this part. I'm a deeply tender human, deeply tender. I feel all the feelings. I'm an empath. I you know what I'm saying? Even in this space, I want to expose that I am nervous, right? I do feel a little bit of uncertainty because this is not a community that I've spent time with before. And I have eyes on me, right? From people who I've never met before, may not have even had a relationship with. That's a normal thing. I think exposing the feeling normalizes that it's there and creates a little bit more comfort for me. So thank you for holding room for me to speak to how I'm doing today. So who am I? How did I get here? And why should you even listen to anything I got to say? I'm going to tell you, I don't know why you should listen to anything I have to say, but you came because you were drawn to the ideas. I do not care if you leave this space and don't remember a single thing about me. I do care that you stay, that you leave here with at least, at minimum, the courage to be more curious inside of these very massive ideas, right? Okay. So again, my name is Nalo. I'm a writer, possibility strategist, as Mianu said. And what I mean by possibility strategist is my mind, my being orients around what else is possible. Okay. That's how I was able to leave the area of binary thinking, right? It's all socialized into, so I'm not saying that I'm just free of that, but if I'm only given two options, I'm trying to think of what's the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth one that I didn't hear about. What are the possibilities in any given moment? You only offer me 2 cereals? I want to know why I don't get them other 50 brands of cereals that's out there. It doesn't matter what it is as a kid, from a kid to now, that's just how I have oriented. I'm a first grade teacher. I teach little 6-year-old smushies, and I love them. I was a nanny prior to start teaching first grade, along with obviously, practicing my research. But I was a nanny for almost a decade, and then COVID happened. So I was with the infant to 3-year-old stage, my favorite age, which in and of itself is different or dissonant to even the imagery of masculinity, right? But it's also a really integral part of how I got where I am today. So I'm a first grade teacher, and I'm also the founder of Black Girl Masculine, which is a space I've created to celebrate and establish a home for exploring nuanced masculinities. My website will go up May 1st, so you'll be able to check out Zidan.com. There will be a space for Black Girl Masculine, and you'll get to read all of my work, see any of my publications, watch any of my videos, any of that stuff, and be in conversation with me. Like, I want anybody who's interested in these ideas, I want to talk to you about them. That's how I feel about it. Because if we don't talk about it, you either going to think you know too much, or there's an influence that is dominating the conversation. And I want to keep nuance and evolution and change the process of being a human in the conversation. This, again, is the most vulnerable I've ever planned to be at a workshop event. You're going to learn a lot about me a bit more personally, but that is because the journey connects to the ideas. Like I said, when I do research, I'm not externally reaching for this person or that person to be like, oh, this person is this, so that means this is what masculine. No, I came from the source. I juxtapose that with so many other things around me, the conditions, the people in my circle, accountability, all those things. But that's important to distinguish. Whew, here we go, y'all. So when I was a child, I was raised by preachers in the Black Pentecostal church, Apostolic Pentecostal. I'm talking about organ playing, blood of Jesus. I'm talking about shouting up and down the aisles, that type of churching. And I still love it to this day. I love gospel music. I love the power of conjuring in that way, even if I'm not so connected to the indoctrination, the religious indoctrination. So I was raised there. You know, I couldn't wear pants at all. Okay. I was saved, sanctified, Holy Ghost filled. Okay. It was not a game. I even hooped. I played ball in a long jean skirt because I wanted to be on Jesus' side. Okay. I wanted to be on Jesus' side because Jesus and I were committed. All right. There was nothing that could keep me away from a prayer, nothing, because that's how deep that's how deeply connected I was to the process of that. But even as perplexing as all that seemed to be to me at the time, which was like, yeah, I went to church. I was raised in the church. That was normal to be in the church. But I was experiencing an otherness in the midst of that. I was experiencing something I couldn't explain, but that didn't align with the way that I was being raised. I was curious about something even more mysterious than playing basketball in a long jean skirt, okay? I was curious about something I could not yet name, what I now know to be masculinity, my masculinity. So no matter how long the skirt or fit the dress was, I was not comfortable with the way that I was being shaped in girlhood, okay? I was being shaped to be readily consumed by men or boys. If a man or a boy was not appealing, or if I was not appealing to a man or boy, I'm in a condition of being left behind, not of God, right? Because in the pulpit, that's what I was taught. I learned that it was not of God to not be available to a husband, okay? And that I had a problem with. I had questions. Children are the most free. So as a child, I recognized myself to be someone who was aware that I had these ideas I was being controlled by under Christianity, but also that there was something else that Christianity didn't even want to answer. So it just pushed against. And that was the fluidity of my gender, of my identity, of my being. So, you know, I mostly enjoyed being a girl as far as I knew. It was all I knew, right? It was the only option that I thought was available to me. And gender, you know, limitations develop through socialization every day. But I didn't enjoy being a girl without my masculinity being recognized. And that made me despise it. And I always used to, I like, even today, I think about my inner child and I'm like, what would have been different had I been able to like be a girl and also be all the other things that I was, and not girl in the container of what was pleasing to patriarchy or to men or to Christianity in any kind of way. I leaned on religious indoctrination often to convince myself that masculinity was a phase that would pass, right? I laid on the altar plenty times asking God, listen, if this is a demon, if I am choosing the devil, take it from me. I need help. I'm weeping. Weeping. I remember calling my pastor. I was 11 years old. Called my pastor to lay face down on the altar to ask God for forgiveness for who I was. It wasn't until I was able to actualize how I saw the world, how I understood how everything around me was interacting with how I saw myself, and what that felt like to me. It felt like violence. It felt like I could not open up to be the best version of myself, my most comfortable self. And I was scared to be, because if anybody else grew up in the church, you know, it is the most scary thing to be queer, especially outwardly. So that's kind of where my curiosity started, right? So one thing I noticed as a child, getting into like the preteen age, was that there was a time where my masculinity, though maybe it still rolled a few people's eyes, okay, was accepted due to the veil of my childhood, right? And I wanted to know why. Because for some reason, my family, even in their hard politics, deviating from gender norms and anti-hell advocacy work, okay, was able to they were able to recognize my masculinity and soften those boundaries to normalcy until I turned about 13. That was the experience of tomboy. Being named a tomboy, I was baffled looking back. As an adult, I'm looking back, I'm like, my name ain't Tom, I ain't no boy. Okay? So where do you get the idea that tomboy is the language that you use to describe an acceptable girl masculinity? Because you saw it in me. Before I even had the language to use, you saw it in me. Because you named my masculinity. That's the conversation I had with my grandmother. You named me masculine before I had the language through tomboy. It's okay, she's just a tomboy because I'm climbing a tree. What about climbing that tree meant I wasn't a girl? What about climbing that tree made me Tom? This is me as a child, y'all. I had all the questions about how we get here and what is going on. Because if it didn't make sense to me, I was going to ask. And that's what people hated about me as a child. It's like, she's just talking. She just blah, blah, blah. But that is how I oriented to saving my own life, staying curious, right? Asking the questions, not letting the questions go because there was a pocket of people who did not want to answer me. I needed to figure it out for myself. So the experience of being named a tomboy happened. I'm like, why is it okay, right? And this is me as I'm getting older. I'm like time traveling here. Bear with me. Why is it okay to call me a tomboy? But it's completely out of the question for me to be queer or trans. Explain. I just, that was a real, and I know I'll never get that answer because my family's still preachers. They still at that church, and I love them to death. It's a both-and relationship. I don't need to discard them, but we have boundaries because I know that they don't care for who I am and how I love, right? And that's okay. Everyone is allowed to express and experience their own variation of freedom, even if they think they're saving my life. They think they're loving me by wanting me delivered and all that stuff, right? But it matters to me that is expressed through a narrative of control and power dynamic, right? In me as a child. So I had that question, why is it okay to call me a tomboy, but I can't be queer or trans? What about childhood made me genderless enough to be named masculine under the umbrella of tomboyism? Being a tomboy was the first acceptable non-male masculinity language that I ever came in contact with. It's the first. And I wanted to know, what about the language of tomboy and me made that masculinity available to me? Why did it connect to an age, right? I figured out later that in the book of Isaiah, they tell you the age of accountability is 13. So I wanted to be sure that I understood that answer. So as a young person, I sifted through to figure out why. I read that Bible about 6 times, and I finally figured out that that's what it was. That was with the age connection. Because before that, it was like, don't blame the child, they're just being a child. Children have energy, they don't know, right? Like taking away the child's dignity. That's what we do often, right? We take away the child's voice, dignity, and agency to speak to their own identity because their smallness equates to a lack of development about themselves. And to explore developmental things about themselves meant that they were at risk for deviating from how we want them to be our child, right? And that was a huge part of how I was the project of the family, because it wasn't going to be long that I could be in the conditions I was, as curious as I was. Okay, they was going to want me delivered. They was going to introduce me to some man, which they did, to try and get me married, okay? Maybe all I needed was to feel loved and safe by some man somewhere. No, thank you, okay? But I couldn't be heard in that way. I could not be heard or seen in that way by them because the lens with which they were willing to see me was limited to the religious indoctrination, was limited by their idea that I would go to hell and so would they for loving me. That is how I got my peace about it. I know you just trying to save my life. I love you too. And I do not need to take that path toward being, why do I need to be a savable thing, right? So, and that's fine. That's fine, all fine and good. That is where my curious journey began. The bridge between my masculinity, healing, and accountability. And I had to start somewhere. So for me, it meant the age-old question, y'all. I bet y'all know what this next slide gonna say. Oh, what is it, y'all? What is masculinity? Who knows, right? Who knows? If I ask every single person in a private space, just me to you, I don't know how many people in here, but I would get that many answers. Is there 88 people in here? I would get 88 different answers, okay? Because masculinity is fluid in that way. It is not something we will allow to be fixed because we recognize it in so many places that deviate from where we're taught that masculinity belongs, and that is with men. See, I knew I was masculine well before the language of masculinity found me. I had no idea what to call myself, what I liked to wear, or who I wanted to love at the time. I didn't even know I was queer. Masculinity and gender are not, I'm sorry, they're not. So I had no idea about all those things, but I knew I was different than who the world and my family wanted me to be. I asked myself all the time, how do I find myself, right? Up under so much socialization. How do I be accountable to all the ways I'm socialized? Because as humans, we quick to be like, hey, look, I would never do that. That's something I would never do. I don't know about why that person doing that, but I would never, okay? We love to say that about ourselves. We do not often recognize how damaging that is also to ourselves. To speak to ourselves as people who are impossible to harm, as if we haven't harmed and also been harmed in our lifetimes, throughout our lifetimes, right? So, and when speaking to how I navigated this answer for myself, I wanted to know, what did I need to figure out to know I was in the process of developing my own life and identity and not just imagining myself as a man, right? If I'm not a man, where do these patterns come from and why do I feel a centered connection somewhere in the mix, right? And this is going to get juicy. So I want you to just take these in and hold them because we're going to talk about it, y'all. I'm excited. What is masculinity really? Is masculinity something you do? Is masculinity something you have? Or is masculinity something you are? Or is it all of them? Right? We're going to talk about it. Because I believe that masculinity can be decoupled from manhood, decoupled from patriarchy, and reveal an entirely different set of data for answering this question. If there's only a focused direction, right, for how we see a thing, we are making the choice, right, to also see a thing through a particular lens only. And that is an important part about accountability inside this. So I do believe that masculine can be decoupled from patriarchy and reclaimed. We'll talk about that too. I believe that dismantling patriarchy starts with reimagining the things we're socialized to think belongs to that system. It means reimagining all the things that we are socialized to believe already belong to men. When I walk into a store, I have to go to the men's section to find clothes I like. This is a fabric. I have to go to a section that says for men, so I know this is not for me. Because the way I am perceived, means I'm not supposed to be in that section to buy my clothes. And it's a shame because I like this blazer. You feel me? I like it. Why I can't wear it? I love turtlenecks. I love the cut of suits. It's my favorite thing. Why do I have to completely disobey how I see myself or my gender to go shopping for clothes I like? Age-old question. So this is what we're going to do, y'all. We're going to go into breakout rooms. I want you to introduce yourself, share your name and pronouns, and I want you to answer this question with your group. What is masculinity to you? Simple and plain, all right? I want you to think of this as a community space, right? We all came here to engage with these ideas and to be in conversation with one another, right? We're here because in some way we care about this topic and how it's talked about. I want us to remember that. So as we go into these rooms, we're going to spend about 10 minutes on the question, what is masculinity? And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about it. Awesome. Welcome back, everyone. I popped into a few rooms. There's so many of you, so I wasn't able to visit everyone, but I was really impressed by some of the things that were being balanced in conversation. And I would love to live hear from a couple groups around some things that, and I want to hear the wows, right? Like I want to hear, what is something that you may have heard from another person that wowed you or brought you some perspective. And also, is there something that you feel is profound and that you want to share in this space as well? But before we do that, I want to do a quick check. If you know how to use the chat. Oh, yes, I can stop screen sharing. I want to, let's take it real quick. I want to do a quick check, right? I want to know how many people in this space actually identify as a masculine person or that they embody masculine energy of some kind in any way. I want you to write the number 1 in the chat if you identify in some way with masculinity. Okay. The ones, okay, I'm loving it. All right, so I want you to write the number 2 if you believe yourself to be completely without masculinity. You ain't really rocking with it, but you're trying to learn something. If there's anyone here who is like, I am divinely feminine only, or I am some other energy presence that is not that. Okay, I'm loving this because, one, it feels great to be around people who are also in conversation with this or in their own identities, right? In their own communities. And I think that that's deeply important. In about, I'm gonna say we can do the responses and then we're gonna take a quick break after we get some feedback, just for people to stretch, get water, use the restroom, before we jump into more of the thick stuff. So I see you, Angie, with the 1 and 2. I'm loving it. I see Laura said number 4. I'm not sure what that means, but I love the nuance. Yes, and I wanted to speak to one thing Eric said, because before we go on our first break, and I'm going to be honest, I like holding doors for everybody. And I don't know if that's like a masculinity thing to me as much as it's like, in men, I often perceive it as like a way that they are socially like constructed to be disarming or seen as like not scary, like, oh, this is a mannerable man, or whatever that other language is. He held the door, he must be kind. And I'm like, it's so
chivalrous.
Yeah, right, like chivalrous. And I don't know, I think the safety in that is also like being able to distinguish the difference between like a thing anybody can do and be like praised for, or like, or when someone is like merely emulating what patriarchy told them to be doing at that particular moment. And I love that you gave the juxtaposition of like, is this something I'm doing because it's a nice thing to do? Or like you were naming the accountability toward like, actually, I got offended because you didn't say thank you. You know what I'm saying? And that can happen at any given moment with anything. But I love that you expressed the lesson you learned in that too. That's really important. I hope that that continues to be something we all navigate. It's like, what do these things mean? You know? So, all right. So now we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to say about 15 minutes. We'll come back at 11:20. Yes, we'll come back at 11:20. We'll do 15 minutes. And I will see y'all in a little bit. Get some water. Take care of yourself. Recenter, whatever you need to do. We're digging in some stuff when we get back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Sorry if y'all heard my movements. I noticed that. I was like, this mic picking up everything I do. Welcome back. I hope that you are able to take care of yourself, that you were able to connect with your needs at this time so you can come back fresh and ready to go. All right. I'm going to jump right in, especially because I want to make sure that we end on time for this segment and that you get the full offering. So I'm going to share screen. Thank you again for everyone who shared their connection to or ideas around what masculinity is or how it shows up in their lives. It is a courageous thing to be able to speak to it, especially given that the impact of masculinity hasn't mainstream, right? And with patriarchal control and the narrative of masculinity obviously has its own impacts on this work that I'm doing and how we talk about it, right? And I want to be able to be in right relationship to all those things. All right. Not this one. All right, we back. All right, so we were back on this question of what is masculinity, right? Before we move on to the actual definitions that I'm going to share with you, and there's a point to why I'm doing that. So go with me. So as I think about navigating this question, right? Like, what is masculinity? I want us to also think about for later, because we will be jumping into breakout rooms one more time to discuss this. But I loved what Anyanwu was speaking to when they said that masculinity is perceived a particular way. I think Elizabeth also spoke to it, and someone in the chat who was talking about how masculinity is perceived a certain way, and that changes our orientation to how safe we are to be masculine, especially because much of the impact we're facing is due to the consequence of patriarchal masculinities. So to stay in right relationship, we're going to talk about all those things, but I also want to make sure that we have a mind toward imagining what could a healthy, accountable, or positive masculinity look like? What does that feel like in our bodies, in our communities, in our interpersonal relationships? What is necessary of masculinity for those things to be possible? Keep that on your brain. Start thinking about it. Give you a little head start for when you jump in those groups. I really want you to engage with those ideas. Oh my goodness, Kimberly has a baby. If I see a baby on the screen, I'm going to acknowledge it, okay? Nanny 10 years is going to happen. All right, so again, I want to make sure that, for me, I think that there is, or may even be, a future beyond gender and systems of normativity and even gender. I'm a gender abolitionist myself, but I know where we at in the world right now, I'm in a both and position. I'm like, I'm here right now in this life at this time in 2022 in these pandemic conditions. And also, I'm being with the idea that masculinity in myself, I am also data toward the conversation of masculinity, and how does that also direct how I perceive and understand what it is. I believe in the power of being able to claim who we are in the midst of a culture that got it wrong, and I mean that to say patriarchy, and that we do interact with masculinity daily, whether we like to or not. It's something that is familiar to us in our culture, and it's also attractive in many ways in our culture. I have some cishet, female friends, and I don't know many of them that's going to be about a man who is not masculine. We have our imagery of what that looks like or what feels good to us inside of that space. And obviously we have to be accountable to it all. So I want to start with this. Masculinity by definition. These are all mainstream definitions that I have found, and they should not surprise any of us here. All right, so number one, qualities or attributes regarded as characteristic of man. Boom. We know how Oxford feeling about us, all right? The quality or nature of the male sex. Merriam-Webster said what they said, okay? The social expectations of being a man. The National Democratic Institute Men, Power, and Politics blog, okay? Of course. I'm gonna just leave it there. Wikipedia, another famous source for finding definitions. A set of attributes, behaviors, and roles associated with men and boys. I don't know if that make me chop liver or not, but this is why this is important. The influence of mainstream definitions, right? And lastly, a socially constructed pattern of being to include toughness, courage, and other attributes associated with maleness. His name was S. Conway, and I forgot to put his name there. I'm human. Sorry about that, y'all. But yeah, his name is Steve Conway. Feel free to look him up if you'd like. His podcast is not that great, but we make do with the content we need to engage with to know the work. All right, so we're going to move into my working definition, right? Or my breakdown of how I am experiencing and manifesting masculinity in my own life. Masculinity for me is an energy, an identity presence, and a nonverbal language that humans can understand and manipulate. What do I mean by that? It does not take a single verbal exchange to know or perceive the presence of masculine energy. We do not need to speak to each other. We do not need to, like, somebody describing me, you know, I started my TED Talk off by saying, if you had to describe me to a friend without saying my name, what would you say, right? The language of masculine may come up. Just because the imagery of me aligns with, even if it's not in a perfect piece, because people have what they want to say about how I dress or whatever, but it's very plain to see that my style of dress, my whatever else, didn't need to be validated by spoken language. It is, I believe that our first language as humans is nonverbal communication. And that perception of picking up from one another is how we stay accountable to that. And abusive power moves into all the stretching beyond that space. For the second bullet, it develops, this is how I'm perceiving it. This is, again, my working definition. It develops to evoke and emulate what accountability to power and structure looks like in each of us. That one is huge for me. Masculinity as an energy presence connected to the socialization of our society right now is connected to things like strength, courage, manly, whatever other attributed manly language we try to throw around when we're talking about this. And I always am curious as to what else there is, what other possibilities can move into the space of this energy. Is it just because the culture of masculinity is still in mainstream media and everywhere really focused on how men are interacting with these ideas? If men don't see other possibilities, does that mean that we're not able to see other possibilities? How do we expand the space of who's included in that conversation? It does not discriminate on the body it manifests in, i.e. me, i.e. some of you, right? Might not be called masculine, but people perceive our masculinities often. They are available to us, and if it presents itself in any way, you know, there's a direction that a person perceives that and responds, right? And that's why that accountability piece is necessary that we're going to talk about. Masculinity is not measured by the absence of or in opposition to femininity or amininity. Amininity is language I created to speak to non-normative and non-binary energies. Masculinity attributed to men, femininity attributed to women. There are so many other types of people than just those two templates. You feel me? So this is why I wanted to make sure that we're not doing that thing where we're like, more of my like balance is that, you know, I am existing in the divinity of the, like, we don't gotta be that deep, fam. I want you to, it can be divine. I respect that your energies are divine, and they're all incomplete and binary. And we must be accountable to that first as we examine that. And lastly, it cannot be taken away. Okay, emasculation to me is not a thing. What control does a person have to remove or take my masculinity from me? None. Now, when masculinity in and of itself is connected to ego play, abuse of power, reaching beyond boundaries, right? We kind of experience a sense of entitlement to that power because of our masculinity, which then resorts us to violence and other egregious behaviors that aren't necessary, okay? If we learn basic things like how to talk to each other, or how to interact in community space, or how we can learn from one another without right, wrong binaries, right? How do we include ourselves when we're talking about masculinity? Because I saw a lot of ones in that chat for people identifying with some form of masculinity or manifestation of masculinity. So if we're talking about masculinity to be a thing that is, boom, I'm like, it's only violent, it's only this, it's only that. I want you to know you are also including yourself as data inside how you think of this thing. There are always multiple perspectives to consider. I know how I see myself. That's the I would never do that thing I was speaking to earlier. We think we have this mind about ourselves. And then there's another hand that is how we are perceived by others. And that's where masculinity gets complicated. Because how we're perceived by others often is being responded to by the dominant culture of said thing, which wasn't even created with me in mind or with me in benefit, right? And that speaks also to how we will be talking a little bit about masculine privilege. All right, so I do not believe it can be taken away. Now, that power and structure accountability I was talking about, we have data for this, okay? I think I want to try this. I want you to put, I want you to put number 1 in the chat if you ever heard or seen or connected to the language of an alpha or high value man. If you have ever seen that before, I want you to write a number 1 in the chat. If you have seen or heard such language. Yup, I see the laughing emojis because it's funny. Exactly. The ones are going to keep flowing. They're going to keep flowing. And the reason is because patriarchy likes to establish its roots inside of how it's socialized to be entitled to power. Okay? So if I am a person who thinks God made me and I gave my rib to make women, and then I did all this stuff, God made me leader of the earth and the land and all that we ain't taking care of because the earth still needs us, okay? But that's another presentation for another day, okay? If that is the case, we must also be mindful that the hierarchies that they're still creating are even amongst their own community, right? Amongst their own community, in that there has to be a beta man, because being a man is now incorporates so much nuance, right? Masculinity degendered or is degendering. That is my purpose in life. I believe one of them is to decouple and degender masculinity. Decouple from patriarchy, from manhood, from maleness as a culture. It is allowed to be there. It is not the sole or only foundational source with which we get data for how to navigate this thing. Okay? I believe that it is, like I said, impossible to be emasculated if you are in right relationship to power. Like I said, if your ego's in it, if you're struggling through to try and figure out what you're entitled to and who should give it to you, sad to say that you are vulnerable to feeling like you are less than the power you feel entitled to. You have to give that power to someone. You have to make yourself vulnerable to that kind of happening. And again, the language is limited. So I wanna be mindful that, even in all this, even in my working definition, even in the things that I've built upon, that this may not be satisfying still to some people. And that's okay. We are all trying to imagine and learn with and from each other, because the masculinities that were acceptable years and years ago are different than the masculinities that exist today. The cultures of freedom, the cultures of nuance that are being introduced in the world, in gender, sexuality, all of it are in conversation with these things. The next part, we talked about masculinity. What is accountability, right? That's language that it's everywhere, okay? Justice, accountability, relationship, right? This language is manipulated by each of us in our own way. Everybody loves to be creative with the word plays and things, and it's cool. I love it myself. I do it myself. But words do mean things. They do mean things, okay? So for the sake of this space, I am going to offer you some definitions that I wrote out for the sake of this workshop. It is important to make sure that these are known and here. So accountability. I want to name these definitions, which I play with a bit to supplement this workshop, but this is how I understand accountability and masculinity in our current world today. Accountability, in this context, is the awareness and ability to respond, face, and account for your life's impact, regardless of fault or intention. Okay? If you bumped into Sally and you didn't mean or intend to bump into Sally, but Sally say her shoulder hurting, go see about Sally, okay? Sally is clearly impacted by you bumping into her. And that's such a small circumstance. It is funny. I see some laughter, but I want you to think about those small moments, because what it means to be accountable is not always meaning that you did something to be a bad person. It means you face the things that you cause impact on. You know what I'm saying? If you created the impact, somebody was impacted by the thing, address it, all right? It's for the sake of right relationship, all right? Not the sake of like being soft and all that. Like, this is what we project onto these definitions. We're like, nah, like, I'm masculine. I don't do all that sensitivity. I don't do all that, man. You know what I'm saying? We are reverting back to a patriarchal lens when we do stuff like that. No one owes your masculinity anything. That's important to know. That is the accountability piece here. Power. All right. This is not definition for power. You may or may not agree. The condition, ability, and or circumstance of having intentional or unintentional influence over another living thing at any moment, especially including exercising advantage over something they want, have, or need. You can point to any oppressive system and name this definition. It's the way it is, y'all. And this is the way I want to posit it for this workshop. So, one of the reasons why I believe masculinity, we are struggling with masculinity being a space where we can actually be with accountability and acknowledge power in the way that I've even presented it here, is because we do not trust each other's discernment with one another, right? If, just like I used with Sally, if I bump into Sally, okay, and then Sally's like, yo, my shoulder, I don't appreciate how you bumped into me. And then I'll surrender to Sally and say, you know what, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do to support you? Because I did injure your shoulder. Sally could either go, you know what, I just need a quick ice pack. It's a little dollar store right there, and then we could call it good. Or Sally could be like, no, forget you. I'm calling the blah, blah, blah. I'm doing the blah, blah, blah. The power dynamic shifts. The thing that I want to offer here, and I know this is a little difficult because it was for me when I first heard it, but we must own our position inside any moment, because power is not a slow orbit around the sun. It changes quickly in an instant. And we forget that because we are not aware of power dynamics in ourselves. Okay? I mean that in any connection or relationships. Collapsing major systems onto individuals will not serve sustainability in relationship. Okay? We are talking about the impacts, right, of us as masculine people, which includes violence, which includes harm, abuse, manipulation. We have to own that that is part of the culture connected to the language we're reclaiming. I own that. Now, will I allow you to reduce me to those things only? Absolutely not, I won't. Because now you know that there is a broader picture, a broader lens with which to view and engage these ideas. And there are people who are left behind when patriarchy is the only lens we can see masculinity. I saw someone speak to fear. That idea that, like, when people see me in a bathroom, anybody ever, I know I got some people who know, especially some queer masculine people, I got to go into a bathroom because the world, not because of me, I didn't ask for that bathroom. Okay, you put the little dress up there, I don't even wear dresses. Okay, that little icon, y'all know what I'm talking about too. So being with that, we are constantly enduring violence. And we are also a part of and connected to the culture of patriarchal masculinities because of the language, because patriarchy coveted it. And now we're in the space of now what? What do we do now? So we do not trust each other. We don't trust our own masculinities, even as people who know that we're data in the conversation. I see people completely thrash themselves when speaking in certain conversations because it's not safe to say that you enjoy your masculinity. It's not okay to say I'm rooted in this, and also this is the kind of masculinity that I am. Get to know me. Don't toss me back up with the patriarchal winds. Okay, I need to know that as a human being who manifests and acknowledges that I manifest masculinity, what is the experience you're having with me? And as an accountable person, I ain't saying that I'm going to be perfect at doing all, I'm still a person who is socialized just like you and all these things. We must be accountable to how we're socialized and what that produces in us, okay? And I want to be mindful that what it looks like to be accountable is also deeply terrifying. Because when you're masculine, and I'm going to speak for myself, I've come in contact many times where my masculinity was the thing that charged me as the guilty party instantly. I'm guilty because I'm masculine. Don't nobody want to hear my side. It's not masculinity, violence. Oh, is violence 2 + 2 does equal 4? Come on here. It is dangerous, and we must be mindful to that accountability on all sides. Accountability is a choice, friends. It's a choice. It requires integrity and self-governing. Okay? Patriarchy does not have integrity. It don't. That's why the decoupling is necessary. Because if they had it, the world we live in, we still wouldn't be talking about unequal pay. We still wouldn't be talking about murdering trans women. We still wouldn't be talking about how we stay in right relationship to our lovers. Okay? Domestic violence. Like we know the stories. We have experienced the violences. Okay? Men have too. Patriarchy don't even serve men. Okay? It does not. It serves destruction, abuse, harm, violence. Abusive power. All right? And that's that alpha man, high value man, coveting influence over strength, courage, and power. That's what that is. Accountability is required in any given moment where power exists. Any moment. Okay? That's including the Sally you hit Sally's shoulder. Okay? I'm talking about small to large. When power dynamics shift, we must recognize it and move to action. Okay? Even when it's uncomfortable for us. The reason why human beings, I believe human beings are struggling with accountability is because the discomfort of facing a person you have caused a disruption to their ease. Whoo! I mean, just feel that real quick, y'all. I could cry for real. Anybody else got somebody in their history they wish they could just talk to for a minute, right? As we still learning and growing and evolving, change is available to all of us, okay? We got some people that don't even remember this changed self, right? Because we have so much that we were learning and growing through previously. And that's important. That's an important juxtaposition. So power dynamics include things like apologies, right? Power dynamics shift when a person surrenders. And that is a very complex thing to hold. I understand. Okay? This does not, and I want to be clear that this does not overlap in the same way for egregious harms. Okay? Because I know there's always the what about this person. I want to be clear that I'm not talking about egregious harms like rape. You can't say sorry for rape. Okay? I'm speaking to interpersonal conflict and at the surface of how we are staying productive struggle for sustainable relationships as masculine people. How to be with your masculine energy responsibly. Surrendering, meaning people who are accountable or making an attempt at accountability in some way. How do you handle them in that space too, right? Does accountability mean making sense of what your demands are, or is it imagining what justice looks like in a particular scenario? That is a really difficult thing I had to navigate for myself, because I don't always, as I thought about my life and looked back over as a teenager and in my younger 20s, I struggled a lot with saying I was wrong. A lot. I didn't want to be wrong because then that made me soft, that made me vulnerable, that made me at the disposal of whoever I was surrendering to. From Jesus to a friend. I felt vulnerable to what that impact would be like. And so I did not come forward until I was able to reckon with how I needed to navigate being an accountable person. What does that look like? And how do I first sit with myself with no one around, no one else to prove it to but me, to work through those things? Adult-child power dynamics, right? Parents, teachers, etc., right? A lot of masculinity in that space, whether we like it or not. And last but not least, confronting kindness, right? People who are deeply kind in any particular way struggle to be held well. Because there was always that person that like pushes the boundary a little bit, pushes it just a little bit. When you're trying to be kind, I've experienced moments where I'll try to be kind or I'm practicing kindness with someone or in a particular moment, and then there's always that like extra push to see how much they can get from me as a kind or giving person. That is a power dynamic as well. How do we hold ourselves in the midst of being accountable to people who are practicing kindness instead of an entitlement to whatever we can get from them? All right, masculinity, what we know. It's deeply connected to patriarchy, manhood, and male culture. Other people experience and embody masculinities that aren't male or men. I named those distinctly for a reason. Mainstream masculinities are driven by cultures of power, dominance, and harm. Those are the patriarchal masculinities we were talking about. And masculinity may incorporate strength that isn't physically or biologically available. As we think about those words that are connected to the imagery of masculinity, we think of strength, courage, bravery, whatever other terms might be thrown at it based on socialization. I hear people use it in their definitions too, even as I've navigated the rooms. But what does strength mean to us? Is it the size of your biceps, right? Is it your traps when you're doing the workout? See who can punch the hardest, who can move the most weight? Or could it also be a mother raising children by herself? Could it also be, because if I think about the strongest person I know, I'm going to name my grandma. You feel me? I'm going to name my mama. You know, I don't even think men come to mind when I think of strength outside of the imagery I'm socialized to point toward, which is that they biologically, your body is this. Like, that matters very little to me if you can't control that body and stop whooping on women and beating trans women and all these other things. It matters that we are accountable even to the imagery that we have shaped in ourselves. Stay curious. Ask yourself the questions. Why do I believe this? Where did I get this from? How do I know this to be real? What do I think of this thing? Question your own self. It ain't crazy to talk to yourself, okay? It's not crazy. You need to talk to yourself sometime. It matters. To talk to yourself offers you the process of accountability to yourself. Think about the week over. You know what I'm saying? My wife and I, we have check-ins every week to talk about our relationship, what has happened, all these things. I want to be able to do that for myself too. I invite all of us into the practice of that. What happened this week? What conflicts did I engage? How did I handle those conflicts? Was that person's humanity still intact as I navigated my feelings? Was I able to create space so that I could return ready for the conversation? Those are important things to recognize as masculine people to me. All right. And masculinity is genderless. That's the last thing. There's so much more. I struggled to consolidate a lot of the big ideas. I'm telling you, I probably had 50 slides, y'all. But we gonna make it work. It's really powerful and beautiful to me to engage these things, especially with all of you. All right, masculinity, where we're curious, especially in this space and in my work, so you can be inside Nalo Mind. Is an accountable masculinity possible? Do healthy and or positive masculinities exist? If so, what does the impact look and or feel like to our bodies, to our relationships, and our communities? I mean, have we even thought about a community orientation to masculinity? Have we been able to, with the abusive power narratives that are dominating that conversation, right? In the midst of being immersed in so much violence, how do you see anything else, right? That's the question around masculinity, right? But because I saw all those ones in that chat, I want you to know that you are also a part of that conversation. How you practice, how you communicate, right? How you show up for one another. What does sustainability mean to you in relationship? Okay? How do you handle big moments of emotion? Do you know yourself to know when you have a boundary to move away from a situation? Because I got a pop-off moment. I have a boundary where I know I'm a pop-off. And that means that I need to be mindful of how far I allow myself to go emotionally in any given conflict. I might need to step away and be like, look, I need to get myself together before I can come to this conversation in a whole way. And that's important. How can we use our masculinities to support our ability to be kind and or compassionate? Why when we talk about masculinity, we're not talking about kindness, nurturance. We're not talking about love, compassion. What happened in us that we have gendered these things, right? And the greatest challenge is that it always starts with men at the center. Our perspectives come from men at the center because we are still under a patriarchal masculine world. That's what's appealing to people. That's what people want to date. That overlaps with a lot of what we look for in lovers. Like, it just is real. It just is. You know, especially in a world where violence is happening all around us. We want to be where it's safe, where someone feels powerful and is feared. And I've seen that so many times in navigating or orienting to this work. What does an accountable masculinity look like in love and conflict? Right? That's an important one. And where does masculinity, accountability, and belonging meet each other? Okay? Belonging is a practice. Put it on a t-shirt and wear it. Belonging is a practice. Everyone is entitled to community, yes. You have to know how to be part of said community. You just can't bust in the door and be like, hey, I can't just bust in no door and be like, hey, black people, I'm up in here because I'm black and I'm here and this is where I belong. I could, right? But there's so much more complexity that I'd have to ignore, right? In order for that space to still feel like it was belonging for me. Because blackness got its own things too, you feel me? Like we got our own stuff. Everybody got their own stuff, y'all. Okay? The Black Pentecostal Church very much does not like a queer person like me. It's just the way it is. You know what I'm saying? So I want us to be able to hold the both end of it all. All right? All right. I know that we are on time. We're going to go a little bit, a few minutes over, but we're still going to give y'all full time. But what I want to do is I want to do a quick 8-minute breakout room where you talk with one another about, have you experienced a healthy masculinity? If so, what did it look or feel like? You may talk about yourself, an experience with someone else or feedback you've gotten or whatever if you don't know anyone. Or if not, if you've never interacted with anything you would picture as a healthy or accountable masculinity, what do you imagine an accountable masculinity can look and feel like? What is that texture to you? How does it feel in your body somatically? How does it feel in your mind to believe that this masculinity is accountable? What does it feel like to interact with it? I'm excited. I'm going to be jumping around, popping in y'all rooms, but just ignore me. I'm invisible. I just want to hear you, okay? All right, y'all. We're going to our breakout rooms. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. I hope that you were able to experience community with one another. Paul, that baby is beautiful. If I see a baby, I'm going to say it. I'm sorry. It's just baby.
Oh, thank you. This is Quail Cloud. Quail Cloud legendary.
Oh, yes. Okay, so before we go to lunch, right, because I want to make sure we eat, I want to hear the food that you were growing in them breakout rooms. Before we go, y'all, I just want to hear a few responses. Tickle my fancy, all right? I do want to be able to have that good blend of people that we hear from. I do not want anyone to feel silenced in the space. That don't mean that I, might not be inclined to choose a person who is less likely to be heard in a particular space like this than others, but I do want to make sure that everyone feels available to the feedback. That's beautiful. I really appreciate all your reflections, whether you experience that healthy masculinity in your life or not. This data is so valuable for how we move forward, how our ability to imagine what is possible, from Tashara to someone who's never experienced it, and meaning Tashara as someone who's actively experiencing it. And it's such a beautiful thing to see the span of possibilities inside this thing if we engage it in a holistic way, right? If we engage it in the bigger picture of it all, right? Not allowing someone to tell us who owns it and then us operate with them at the center because they said. I'm a person who, you can't tell me something until I have said that I believe that thing to be true. You can tell me, but I have to examine it. It has to spill through my pores before it is concretely a part of either my value system, what I believe, what I'm gonna even repost on a social media. I'm very intentional in that way. And I want us all to care about the kind of like the things we put out, the kind of way that we experience each other, to be aware of ourselves in the ways that we know how. All right, so we're going to dismiss, but to close, like hearing from all of you is so beautiful. And I want to gently remind us too, again, about this one last thing before we dismiss, and that is, hold on, belonging is a practice. Put it on a t-shirt and wear it. Like I said before, it is important to know. Community is not something we're merely entitled to. Belonging is a practice. We learn how to share space with one another. It always will come up against our need or entitlement as humans to feel like we deserve to take up this much amount of space, not this amount of space. Like No one has given the actual percentages for that, okay? It takes self-awareness, all right? This means that even though everyone deserves to have access to a strong community of people, we also have to practice being part of it, okay? And we will always be drawn toward power because many of us are surviving dire conditions, right? Inside of these survivalist power dynamics or survivalist masculinities, we've learned to normalize things that keep or make us feel safe, even if it is unsustainable and against the worldview we actually want to be part of. And that's normal because it's how survival works, right? Like, there is no need for a villain or hero in every single scenario. That is a way we've been trained inside of binaries. Those binaries trap us in patriarchy's gaze. There doesn't need to be an innocent or guilty party, okay? Especially inside conflicts, right? Those things don't actually exist. How do we get to the point of questioning them so that we are in right relationship? We've been, we've been guilty of things. We've been without being guilty of things. But the mix of that is the naming and what that does to our humanity. So, we've been both those things and not accounting for ourselves, even to this moment. We were talking about looking back. There's somebody that you could probably apologize to, right? All of us, right? And that's okay. We must expose that thing to make it normal. Like, you're going to feel something, baby. You're going to feel it because it is uncomfortable to be accountable. But I think what we learned inside this moment from some of the testimonies, from the fact that some of us have never experienced that. If I may, JR, real quick, JR says something that was really special to me. And that was that their healthy masculinity was something that they recognized in their own evolution into being, like as a queer, like masculine identified person, right? Like they found that out in the journey, and that's so beautiful. Dismantling patriarchy to me starts with being accountable to all the ways it influences your everyday life. Dismantling patriarchy means first taking claim of and owning our positions inside these systems, where we benefit, where we're harmed, working together to figure out how we strengthen our villages in that process. Thank y'all so much for this workshop, this first half. We got some more conversations to have: masculinity and anger, masculinity and love, masculinity and relationship conflicts. We're going to talk about those things intentionally without the slides. Ain't no slides. We talking about it. All right. And it's important to me. You're interacting with it. So it is important to your life and your safety as well. All right. We're going to dismiss for lunch. I appreciate y'all so much. This warmed my heart this morning. And I look forward to seeing y'all back at, somebody help me. Maza, what time are we back?
That's a great question.
1:15 on the East Coast, but people are in different places. So 45 minutes from now.
Okay, awesome. 45 minutes from now, 1:15 East Coast. Do the math for the rest. Love y'all, family. See you soon.
Thank you, Nalo. Wonderful morning.
Thank y'all so much. I would love to know how you're feeling. How is it? Mine's is like big pop energy. Yes, indeed. Please drop in either a word, a sentence, anything that speaks to you about how you're feeling. And feel free to drop in any feedback you have about how the workshop has landed on you so far. I definitely, I'm going to give y'all my big three, okay? Libra Sun, Aquarius Moon, Leo Rising. That might make some of y'all not like me, but I'm very much a person who cares what other people think. I don't mean to. It's innate in my skies, okay? I care a lot about the impact I have on other people. So that was just a fun fact about Nalo. Yes, I am a Libra. October 11th, y'all. Okay, I'm loving these words. Yes, indeed. I'm seeing moved, energized, warm. Very good. Okay, Caprice. Okay, I like that. Enlightened, stretched, and open. Pensive. Okay, Eric. Stimulated and energized to explore. Kathleen, that's excellent. I feel the same way. I got up, I had to go outside. I had to really stretch and get some Because if I was in the room with y'all, I'm going to tell y'all straight up. If I was in the room with y'all and we were in person, I'd be bouncing around the room. If y'all think I got some energy now, I'm a cartwheeler, okay? I do whatever feels good in that moment. We bring the work not to be all boring and static and weird. Like, bring what you know. You still know what you know, even in a cartwheel. I'm going to tell you that. I'm seeing grounded, grateful, inspired, and broken open. Wow, Lucy, that's excellent. Thoughtful, energized. Okay, shifting energy. Okay, Erica, show some Libra some love. That's all I want to see. Yes, indeed. Very full. Okay, Elizabeth, Aquarius moon. Libra, you October 10th. We might be best friends and you don't even know. Intrigued, expansive. Yes, this is beautiful. And yes, Dave, cartwheels. Okay. And Dave, if you need a nanny, that baby is cute. Yes, so I'm so excited to be back with you. I'm really, really, really energized. Like, the softness. I want to thank everyone who has shared so far. Is it Baby Dahlia or Dalia? What is it? How is it pronounced?
Her name is Dahlia.
Dahlia. I don't know you, but I love you. Just know that. All right. So I'm so grateful to everyone who has shared so far. I'm so excited to finish out this space strong and to engage with you. Okay. Ain't no more slides. The slides are done. We're going to talk face to face, head on to some of the things that we need to navigate more intentionally. But before we do, I have a surprise. Okay. Now, this is a surprise that I want to contextualize why no place is safe. And I received a message on Instagram from a person who says that they have joined this call. And they were not so happy with what I was producing, okay? So I want you to know, person in this room, that I see you. I see you hiding behind that anonymous picture, and I'm going to expose the message that you wrote to me. But for the purpose of, I want this to be clear, for the purpose of expressing and starting to ground in what it means to share in accountable masculinity. So this is a masculine person, right? This is a masculine person, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to expose this person's name or identity. I don't feel it's necessary. Hey, Nalo, you are not, I'm sorry. You are not anyone that I would ever listen to about masculinity. I came to that group, and you don't need to be teaching anyone, let alone kids. Number 2, get over yourself with the he, she BS. It's a reality that you're a woman, period. Number 3, you're trying to poison the mind of those people in there because you don't want to accept reality. People like you are exactly what's wrong in the world. The shit you're doing is not okay. Get help. Okay, so look, if you back in here, hey, you feel me? You don't have no power over me. I would not tolerate disrespect in any capacity. That's a no for me, okay? And I wanted to expose that because it matters that violence that happens in any capacity, right, is unacceptable. Okay, where's the integrity? We're sitting here talking about accountability, right? So let's root in accountability. Okay, if you have something else you need to say to me, you know how to contact me, obviously, so let's talk, all right? Otherwise, let's situate ourselves and recenter, okay? I want everyone to drop into their bodies, their dignity, drop into your own space, realize the heaviness of your weight, realize the expansiveness of your being, and let's reroot ourselves. I want to announce a couple gentle reminders on the trigger warning piece. We will be talking, the things that may come up, talking about violence, sexual assault, people's stories. Obviously, in this time where I want to speak more with you, answer some of your questions, things like that. I want to be mindful that it is hard to sometimes hear these stories or share these things. And if anyone does need to step away, come back, pause this experience, like, please take care of yourself as you need to. And we're gonna let you back in if you come back. All right. So I want to talk about I want to like open the floor up so that we can actually talk a little bit to each other. I saw some people that had questions, comments, feedback, and just like curiosities around how we navigate masculinity, accountability, community, and belonging. And I want to be able to engage with you on those things. So first, I want to open up the floor for any questions or comments, either on the workshop or things that you'd like to drop into the group and hear from some other people as well. Feel free to raise your hand, and then I'll call on each of you to share your piece. We do want to keep the sharing to a 2-ish minutes kind of thing, just so we can get as many people as we can. But I'm really excited that we are able to share space here today. I understand also, like, just to make it known, I understand that these ideas are deeply complex and much bigger than me, right? Much bigger than any of us. And I think that one of the edges that I would like to see really explored is that discomfort space that would make us respond like this, right? That would make us like enter a space and be like, actually, I need to tell this person about themselves, okay? They identify themselves as a masculine person, right? So you came here curious about what I had to say, but you didn't like what I had to say. And I wanna really be in the practice of like that exposure for the sake of accountability, okay? I have my own boundaries. You cannot access my peace or ease without my permission. You did not do anything to me. If you are back here, I need you to know that. But also, I want us to care about how we treat each other, okay? So as we navigate these things, asking questions, you can direct something toward me or toward another person who has commented at any point in time. I am okay. I really appreciate all the love that I'm getting, some direct messages. I appreciate y'all so much. I am fine. I promise you, because I'm clear on my boundaries and my dignity is intact. That is not always available to me, but it is available to me in this moment, and I'm grateful for that. Okay, so you can feel free to drop questions and things in the chat too. I want to make sure the accessibility is here. Everybody don't like to be speaking out loud and spotlighted and all that stuff. So if you feel like dropping a question or a comment in the chat as well, I'm happy to connect with you all. I also will be leaving all my contact information if anyone wants to be in community with me. I like friends, you know what I'm saying? I just moved to Durham, North Carolina, and I don't have no friends. So if y'all in the area somewhere, I'm happy to connect. Or if y'all are thinking big ideas and y'all also want to connect around some of those things, I'm such a big idea explorer, and I would love to talk with any of you. All right. Now, can y'all see and hear me? Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that was really important. And something you said really struck me just now. And that was that in the midst of like where we're socialized and how we're thinking about these ideas, we get lost in kind of like a blame of ourselves. Like, how am I like perpetuating this culture? Is a little too hard on yourself to me, and too hard on each of us, right? We were immersed in these systems. I mean, I really want all of us to grasp that. We're immersed in these systems, and the impacts have consequences. And so, like, you know, in your journey, yes, we're all looking to figure out how to be more accountable people. And that's an important factor in even navigating accountability, is also knowing that both end space. Like, yes, absolutely, learning to be accountable and to know the systems we're up against and what those impacts feel like, who they impact, how I fit into that, right? Because I can't help that I benefit from colorism. There's nothing I can do about it. I just do. I have to own my position inside that, right? If I don't own my position inside that, I will try to defend myself as a person who then feels like these systems are collapsing onto me. No, we are talking about accountability through the lens of, actually, I am a person who didn't ask to be born, but I was born with a particular set of advantages and disadvantages in this wild world that we're in. And the accountability I have to this present world is to be uncomfortable, right? Where I need to be uncomfortable. It is to be recognized in my humanity, right? And it is also to be present with the impacts that I did not create, okay? White people inherited being racist. That's why people say, it just is. It don't feel good to be, white people not walking around being like, you know what, I am racist. It doesn't happen. But the promising part of it all is when we can recognize, like, I benefit from this system. There's nothing I can do about it. How can I be more aware of myself, how I share space, how I distribute like a kind of effort toward dismantling that, right? Like, what do those things look like? Am I sharing space with Black and brown people to make sure, you know what I'm saying? Am I hearing from dark-skinned people, from fat people, from people who are different than me, right? Am I allowing myself to be immersed in what makes me uncomfortable so that I am accounting for that? But that is still not something that you take on, internalize as a thing that you can fix on your own. There is no complete practice for doing that. It's just the truth. So the way we do it is to work on how our individual selves fits into the greater puzzle of these greater systems, okay? We did not create them. Sometimes they're not even with us in mind, okay? But our impacts are still based on these things that came before us. So I want you to be gentle to yourself on this journey, and also like continue to be accountable. You're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to hurt. That consciousness, I'm telling you, it just doesn't feel good. And that's important to recognize. So thank you so much for sharing that and for being so vulnerable to share it. Because it's hard for people to say, like, this is hard to figure out for me, right? I probably spent my whole 20s, probably like the majority of my 20s, being like, I'm light skinned, I ain't even do nothing. I ain't do nothing to dark skinned people, right? Spent so much of that time because I could not own the position that I was in, that I took up. Regardless, it don't mean you go around smacking dark skinned people. It means that the systems in place benefit me over their lives, period. However that feel to you, deal with your own feelings, okay? But you have to own your position. And I think that matters so much. So I wanted to make sure that I brought my own example of that into it, so as to not speak to how someone else needs to be doing anything, but it is very important that we learn to live with that discomfort. That is the only way we'll be able to acknowledge conflict, the only way we'll be able to be responsible in our organizing and our pushing against, to not dehumanize, all those different things. So thank you so much for sharing. Yes, and we want you to just name those ideas out loud. Absolutely, that was excellent. I love that you brought up the masculinization of people, even without their consent. Fat people, dark-skinned people, they're just masculinized because we are in under the umbrella of whiteness as a system of harm also. And I really want to just say thank you for what you shared. The question I might have for you would be, what do you think of yourself? Like, you spoke during that time of like how you're perceived, and that's a valuable gaze to look through, especially because that's what you're experiencing, right? Like, the impact of the world on you is that you are experiencing a particular kind of harm, and like, what's the language I can use for this? Combination of harms based on who you are. And so, like, but I didn't hear you speak to like how you understand your masculinity, or if it's something that's part of you, because I heard you name that, like the masculinization, but who are you as a person? I'd love to hear from you. Yes, that's completely understandable. That's the juxtaposition we're all navigating, even at this time, right? Especially given that our masculinities are very much, I'm trying to be careful with my language here. I think it matters a lot that we be able to have the perspective of how we see ourselves, how we're experiencing ourselves, what language feels fitting to that self, and also be mindful of like the impact of what that means. Like, I think every day about, if I claim or reclaim myself as a masculine person, what does that mean in the world, right? What does that mean to my wife? What does that mean to my friends? What does that mean to what would be considered feminine presenting people or feminine embodied people? You know, like, what does it feel like to be around me? I'm in constant conversation of that always, because I want to I want to practice what it means to have an observable, like transparent masculine culture that allows vulnerability and the complexity of everything else that is considered feminine or whatever. I'm like, there's no separation. Masculinity is no more powerful than anything else. Patriarchy told us that there was a hierarchy of power, okay? That is not femininity. Like, what is the hierarchy that we believe that says femininity is beneath or subordinate to masculinity? Who told us that? Where do we get that from? And how do we detach that from that space? We do it through our own living, right? We do it through our own lives. Okay, this language is the one we were birthed into, right? I'm constantly creating new language. What is masculiminality but a word I made up? All this stuff is made up, right? I think what is important is that, like Farron, like me or anyone else, that we get the opportunity to speak to who we are, regardless of how it feels to someone else, okay? Plenty of times people want to tell us that we're not trans, or we're not real because we're trans, or because we're, supposed to be this way or that way. Like, no, I want to be visible, and I want to be in my dignity in that visibility, right? I want community with people who know how to practice, even like practice just being, like I said, belonging as a practice, just knowing how to be with people who are different than you, okay? You do not have to run away from everything that you don't agree with. It's fine, baby. You do not have, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I really want to encourage us to just like, I like that femiliminality. That's cute. I love it. Look, I'm here for it. Let's create all this stuff, break it down and create it again. And I think that it's important that we have that agency within ourselves. Like, we don't have to prove to anyone externally who we are, but that perception imagery is impactful to our lives. And that's what Farron was talking about, which is like, how I'm seen is this. That creates a certain set of conditions for me, and I'm surviving those conditions, right? What does it mean to also like love the self that I am in the midst of that violence is what we're up against, right? That's the hardest part. I hated myself most of my life. And that was because I didn't know what I was or was not allowed to be. I wanted to be loved by my family. I wanted to be embraced and protected and worthy of their love, right? I can't do that if the limitations that you have for seeing me are between a binary that does not serve me or include me, okay? I am saying I am beyond and transcending this space. I need you to be able to imagine something else. You telling me there's a heaven and a hell that you've never seen before. This was my question to every Christian. I have to have faith that exists, baby. I have to have faith. You want me to believe that there's a giant lake of fire somewhere deep under us? Is it the core of the earth? I don't know. I respect that belief system exists, because for somebody that brings peace, that brings ease, that brings joy, that brings an answer, right? Because humans need to know. We don't like abstract. We don't like non-binary. Is this or that? Is yes or no? Is innocent or guilty? We need to be able to place people. And I'm asking that we stay curious, and that we detach this idea that we need to control how we see people to engage with them. Okay? I do not have to put on nothing that I don't want to put on for you. We're not sleeping with each other. We're not in community. Even if we were, it ain't happening. Okay? You do not have access to me to even ask me that. Accountability requires relationship. This is why I don't believe on the let's jump all on one person and tell them that a system is the reason that we're completely disregarding them as a human. I want to be mindful of how we treat each other and how we show up in our authentic selves. That's not available to everybody, right? That's hard to do. But when we do, that's the part that's like the gray area, which is like, how do I still orient myself to loving myself and being in a world that does not love me, regardless of my love for self, right? Thank you so much, Farron, for sharing that. And I love that piece on masculinization, because that's something that like I personally can't speak to in an intentional way as a non-fat person, as a light-skinned person. And it matters to me that you are here to show up and share that perspective. And I appreciate that vulnerability. I appreciate you sharing that. And I hope, we can be in community. I've seen you so many places before, yes? I feel like we've been in Village before. Okay, I'm making sure. So good to see you, fam. Really, it is. Before we move on from more questions, I wanted to offer this last part to that I did write, but I'm gonna go ahead and I like the energy of the space. I feel comfortable here, and I hope y'all feel comfortable with me. If you don't or feel challenged, that's also okay too. I'm still here in love. You can message me if anything comes up for you. I'm about that action if you ain't know. So, so, I wanted to tell a little bit about not just how I got here, but what how that journey has served me as a masculine person. I think it's important. Hold on one second. Oh, here we go. All right. Can everybody see me, hear me? I'm wiggling. Okay, I'm making sure. All right. So one of the things that I think is important in the story of how I met accountability is this. When I was a child and went through the whole church thing and, the harm of that, all of that, I was left with the most devastating trigger warning: child sexual abuse, sexual harm, violence, assault. If you need to remove yourself, I want to give 60 seconds for that to happen. Awesome. Okay. All right. Thank you for your patience with me. I like to leave that time because I know how these things can be tender. So as a young child, a young girl, I still recognize this child as a young girl. And I spent a lot of my time in that, tomboy phase and kind of, starting to actualize myself around 6 or 7 years old. Or at least asking the questions, right? Because I didn't know for sure about anything as a 6-year-old. I'm like first, second grade-ish, and I'm trying to figure out how to color in the lines and figure out what 2 + 7 is. I'm small, so but I had such powerful imagination, what I thought was my superpower. I could imagine beyond the answers that someone or options someone gave to me for a particular thing. And growing up in the church, that was hard for me because as I started to come into my masculinity, it was less and less acceptable for me to sing in the church, for me to play the organ, for me to connect with, anybody there, really. My family started to separate me from my cousins because I had a demon that was the homosexuality spirit. Y'all done heard it before, I'm sure, or at least have heard of a story where that has occurred. But the thing that kind of really brought me into the both and experience of this life was at the hands of my father. So my father was the first man to ever penetrate my body. The reason that I was able to acknowledge that both and experience and that accountability experience that happened for me maybe mid-20s came from this period of time, right? I loved my father. I mean, as a child, he was what I knew protection to look like. He was where I felt safe. He was where I experienced my fullest being. I was so impressed with everything he did. He was a singer. He was a boxer. You know what I'm saying? He was a critical thinker. He was curious like me. He taught me how to play basketball. Taught me how to play the keys. He really was a staple in my development. And I was so grateful for him because my mother, who's a drug addict, she, we were taken from her, put in foster care, and he got me out. So, at first I was just the most excited child. He was at all my basketball games. He was at, he really, I'm talking about if you were to describe what the best dad would be like, my father would overlap. Never talked to me any crazy way. He didn't, none of that until I hit puberty at about just before my 10th birthday, right? My body started to show that it was, it had the power to reproduce. It started to reflect those things, hips filling out, all those things. We know what those things are. Those are no secrets. And then I started to notice that I was being treated differently by him. At first I was like, oh, he's upset because I'm like, I started wearing basketball shorts to go outside and play, or like some other thing. But after a while, I started to notice that the patterns that he was practicing with me were like crossing some boundary that I didn't know was a boundary, but was very much like feeling uncomfortable somatically. Like something's wrong, but you don't actually have that physical thing that happened yet. You're like, nah, something is not right. And as I'm listening to my body, I realized that like things like sleeping in my bed or any of those other things started to be really weird. I was at his disposal for about 3 years, just like full intercourse with me as a child from this very young and tender age. And the moment that I came to like what, I want to fight for my own freedom. I want to fight for who I am as a person. I want to fight for my dignity. I want to fight for what it means to like be in right relationship to the people in my life, was produced because right when he was about to go to court, because at first I would not report him. I was like, he gonna stop? I'm praying to Jesus. He's always on time. That's why I hate that saying. I hate it. He's always on time. When is the time? I started to really like kind of like conjure in my mind, like the idea that I'm praying to this entity and they know the right time that they are going to come and help. And that time does not come. It just completely imploded me. That is where I started to have curiosity around what the deity or what I was praying to, all those types of questions. Moving forward, I was back in foster care. And obviously I was raised mostly in foster care. And so I was like a young child up to about 6 with my mother, taken from her, till about 10 or 11 with my father, back in foster care until I emancipated myself. And the thing that really stood out to me was like, I had to reconcile a really massive happening, because when the court case came up, when I finally said, like, I can't take this no more, my body is not able to withstand this kind of harm. I'm too small. I don't know what to do. Like, I have asked him plainly. I have gone to him. I have like cried, like whatever other things I have as a child, as my power, because I knew I was a young abolitionist. I was reading Bell Hooks and Angela Davis, and like I was ready to like actually like put a pin in what it meant to send people to prison. And what I would read about most was Black men. So my father fell into that kind of role. And on the day that I said something to my school finally, because I was terrified. I didn't know what else to do. I was put back in a foster home. And on the week that my father's verdict was supposed to come in, somebody shot him at point blank range twice in the head, death instantly. They came to my foster home and they told me, they said, listen, we are so saddened to report to you that your father was murdered last night. I didn't cry. I didn't know what to do. I just felt like I was the cause of his death and that I made the wrong decision, right? Accountability changed for me instantly in that moment. Because as time went on and as I got older, I had to reconcile with a couple things. One, this man hurt me worse than any other human I have experienced and to this day have experienced in my life. And I love this person more than I have ever loved anyone in my life. How do those two things come together in the experience of me? So when I would, do different advocacy work, protecting kids against sexual violence, a lot of my story was like really separated from the others because I didn't only speak to the harm I endured. I wanted people to know the relationship we had. So there wasn't this position of a bad person that did this. It's like, this is a person who had access to me, who made this decision. We don't need to make those villains out of people. I started to really question that, the binary of that innocence and guilty from that space. I started to really be with what masculinity was through the imagery of my father, so that I could be in right relationship to how I did not want to be in practice of masculinity. What did it mean to my dad to cause me harm? And what did it mean to me to move forward, to trust, right? To not want to grow up and practice an abusive power toward others. What in me changed that, right? Like, what happened that makes me ineligible in some way in my mind? This is what I'm asking myself, to do that. And the only thing I could come up with realistically that wasn't pathologizing myself or creating some imagery of like, I ain't supposed to be here, you know, any of that stuff. Like, what came to me was just that I am living a deeply complex experience, one that doesn't seem to fit together with certain other narratives of that story. But what I wanted to really recognize is that the whole of the story is where we actualize how to imagine the solutions, right? If we only make villains of people, we create a separation, because we then say, I am never a person who would do that. Instead of the accountability toward the systems, the ancestors, the people, the interactions I've had in my life could very well produce multiple kinds of harm. It could very well produce anger, which I still to this day am very conscious of. I am an angry person, right? And that's okay, right? Like, I have my own methods for de-escalating myself. I have boundaries so I don't get there, right? And I make sure that the impacts that come from a moment where my anger is showing up, that it is me presenting myself to whatever I need to meet impact-wise. So as I'm thinking about this story and what it's taught me about myself, about my masculinity, and the point that I want to make here is that we all have our story. If we went through and had every one of these picture squares tell their story, we'd be in here crying. I'm gonna just keep it real. I know that to be true, because we have all just been through so much, right? The systems do not serve us. And the only way, right, for us to be able to be in right relationship to how we want to be seen, heard, felt, is to establish our villages. How do we do that as masculine people? Because that's the point I want to make. Because masculine people, we do this thing that I don't like, right? Where we be like, you know what I'm saying, staring at each other from across the room and being all protective of the woman we with for no reason, and like just weird stuff that we do. I'm like, just say hello, friend. You watching me? Like, I'm like, what is this imagery we have that makes us start off disconnected, right? How do I find my people if what it means to be masculine is to be dissonant to affection, is to be dissonant to vulnerability, honesty, sensitivity? This is how I know that femininity, masculinity, amininity, which is those gender creative energies, that language, to start off in that disconnected space makes us start from a place of conflict. What does belonging mean if we start from that place, right? I would like to see us as a village, as people, right? Learn what it means to be accountable by starting with ourselves, okay? The only controlled factor that we have any decisions over. We only have ourselves, y'all. This is what I know myself to have done in my early 20s. I did that because, you know, my father, he did this to me. And when I was growing up in foster care, and when I was doing this, I had all the things. But there is no hierarchy of injustice or oppression, like Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde tell us, right? And how do I orient myself to know that I have experienced these things? I deserve community. I deserve to be in right relationship to a group of people who see me, know me, and love me, right? A group of people to hold me accountable, excuse my language. Hold me accountable is punitive language that I do not like to use. I'm in the practice of removing it. Accountability starts with yourself, and it is a choice you make, okay? You cannot force anyone else into accountability, okay? You can be violent, you can organize their exposure, whatever, but we don't have control over the stepping forward, okay? If it doesn't come from a place of choice, is it justice, okay? The point that we are trying to be with is how do we navigate, especially with masculine people who are already seen as the violent, you're the harm doer, you know, if the police get called, that's where they headed. Who masculine? And it's the truth. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. And so that's why it starts within ourselves. It starts with boundaries that we set with one another. Because we don't got the time, right? I had to have that boundary slide because y'all don't know me personally, right? If y'all didn't know the things that I found unacceptable, I couldn't then like refer back to anything to say like, I actually did tell you that this was not acceptable to me to feel safe or comfortable or like myself in this space, right? On the other side of it, it's like, oh, if I do name my boundaries and you cross them, right? I get so curious about the space of why the boundary was crossed, what it teaches us to cross it, but abusive power, and how we rectify that space, right? I don't think everybody always commits acts of harm on purpose, but I do think that, like I said in my definition, to face and respond and account for our life's impact, whether it was intentional or not, regardless of fault, right? And I think that's where it starts. But we do the thing of innocence and guilt too much, especially as masculine people. I see it all the time. Our masculinity has to self-regulate when we are in right relationship to our power. Whether it's a white person and a Black person, a queer person and a straight person, a man and a woman, two trans people, two queer people, whoever it is, okay? Violence can happen between any groups of people, any identities at any time, okay? So I wanna make sure that we are in commitment. And Angie, I love that you just completed my sentence. A committed relationship with ourselves, a right relationship to our power. If we do not, we will lose the earth. We will lose relationships. We will lose one another. We will lose what community actually is, how powerful it is, right? So much of the fight we're having with the world is a bunch of people who want to have control over a narrative, not people who are trying to figure out how to solve the problems, like hungry people, homeless people, racism, homophobia, transphobia, violence toward children. How are we responding to the roots, right? How are we responding to how we as people engage with the narrative rather than saying that we are the tell-all be-all? We come into spaces to talk about these things, and we talk about how we are more harmed than other people, how our stories are worse. I want us to situate ourselves in that saying of Audre Lorde Bell Hooks: there is no hierarchy. Patriarchy, binaries, they teach us hierarchy, okay? We are enduring hierarchy. We see that they don't work, okay? We have the evidence. You can look anywhere. None of these systems work in the favor for the good of the people as a village. They don't, because they don't teach us what to do with difference. They don't teach us what to do with the evolving humanities that are showing up here. They don't teach us how we stay in right relationship to one another inside those conflicting beliefs. How do I be in right relationship to a Christian as a queer person, as an openly queer person who wears clothing that is not fitting to how you believe I am living a righteous life? Whatever you think, cool, you know? It does not matter. It's not even your business. Go back over there and do your how valued man stuff if that's what you want to be doing. The point that I want to make very clear is that we need each other. And I ain't trying to be all kumbaya. That's some true shit. Excuse my language, but it's true. We need each other. If we can reconcile that we need each other, then we can also talk through and navigate and imagine together the possibilities for creating spaces that actually, feel like they're inviting of us and our nuance and our difference. So if we do see something different or new, I'm like, hey, friend, I want to meet you. Instead of, nah, I don't do all that gay stuff. I don't do all that, that trans, nah. You know what I'm saying? It's too much control over how we want the world to be for us and not what is the world we live in? How does our life impact the world that we want to see happening? Okay? I was also a liar for most of from when my father was killed up until maybe, I'll be a lifelong liar. Forget it. It's like an addiction, right? You either find a method for actually like being with that thing and nurturing yourself inside the healing journey of that thing, or you don't, and you continue to act on that thing. But for me, I'm like, we don't even talk. That's a tender play. We don't even talk about liars. We don't like. It's just too hard, right? It's too hard to be like, I lied to you about this thing, or I didn't tell the truth because I hated myself. So if you ask me my name, I might tell you what I said. The lady name was Susie or whoever. I bumped the shoulder. I might say her name. I might say her name because there was something deeper there. So while a person who I lied to is internalizing the harm from the lie, okay, I'm also navigating harm to myself. How do we discern that within one another so as to not feel like we need to be punishing each other, right? How do we see that and engage with that compassion in a real, tangible way, even especially as masculine people? You want to see the imagery of masculinity change? Start with yourself. Because to meet you today in this small group, you should be a masculine person in those groups. You should be the example of healthy masculinity that someone interacts with every day. You should be the person that is the example for someone to come to this group and say, I'm experiencing a healthy masculinity. How we practice that is through the integrity that is so lost in our species, okay? To facing the damage we've caused, right? And to be in right relationship to our humanity in the midst of, right? Being with how we navigate relationship to the harm we've caused. That shit is not easy. I had to go to each person I lied to. If I was really gonna do this, y'all, I had to go to each person. I don't care if any person I remembered, I called. Because it did not matter to me that it would be like, I'm panicking, I'm weeping, I'm vomiting, right? Because somatically, it brings up responses to face your shit. It brings it up, okay? You smack somebody, you call somebody a stupid B, you know what I'm saying? Like whatever the thing is, you bumped her shoulder. It does not matter. How are we resolving the impact of that? I call friends from years ago who I might have apologized about something that I did or was reactive in. And I'm like, hey, I want to check on you. I want to check on our relationship because I know those things residually last over time. How are you feeling? How are you doing? Right? Check on your village. Check on your friends. Check on your children. Because a child gonna look, you want to dismantle a power dynamic? Listen to your child. Ask them if you're being mean to them. Okay? Every week, my first grade students, I ask them, I'm like, how did you feel this week with me as your teacher? What else do you need in the classroom to feel like you want to come to school tomorrow? Right? Have I been mean to you? Did I hurt your feelings this week? Okay? Because the relationships matter. Because the relationship and the trust is being built, right? Not my ego, not how I want to keep thinking about myself, not how I want to be comfortable in the seat of my own righteousness. Okay? Come on, somebody, look. Because that self-righteousness where I would never do that, baby, if you was in the right conditions, okay? Because people do not harm people for no reason in the sense that they are like people who are accountable. Like we all navigate the dissonance of coming into contact with other people's impacts all the time. This thing happened to me, it caused me to respond like this. I met a person who that response is now in dissonance to them, right? And it's a chain that goes on and on and on. So my call to action for each of us is the relationship to ourselves and the relationship to one another being commitments that we make based on our own actions, right? How do you want to be handled in conflict, right? How would you want someone to handle you for the egregious thing that you have done to them? Whatever that thing is, you know what it is. The last person that you had come to you or that you knew you caused harm to, whether you cursed them out, whether you put your hands on them, whether you talked to them crazy, something that was outside of the integrity of who you are. You have to say it aloud. You have to be with it by yourself in a room with no one else around. You have to be doing it for you. Right relationship takes practice. Right relationship takes mindfulness. And it takes the courage, because we talk about masculinity, everybody got courage till accountability on the table. Everybody's strong until accountability on the table. Okay? I'm bench pressing. Everybody got it until it's time to talk about you hurt me. You hurt me. And I'm tired of the patterns that you will not address in yourself so that you're not bringing that violence to me. Boundary. Check on your village. Get feedback on yourself from your children, from your colleagues, from your friends, from that intimate circle of people who you tell your secrets to. All right? I want to open it up for questions again, or comments, or anything of that nature. This is the most vulnerable I've ever been in any event ever. But I feel like as the work is deepening, as my excitement in this work deepens, I care so much about how little we know about building sustainable, accountable relationships to ourselves, our identities, and each other. Okay? Thank y'all so much for listening to my story. I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. All right, I know we got about 30 minutes left. I'll hit the chat, raise your hand, whatever we need, and we can answer some questions. So let me know if y'all have anything that y'all are curious about. If you would like me to expand upon anything, I would love to talk with you. Please, thank you so much. Y'all don't have me crying up in here, okay? Because I have crying masculinities, okay? So don't play. All right. Yes. Okay, I love that so much. And I feel like I've said that before in like maybe within 5 years ago. I remember myself speaking to this, and something my now mom, Alexis DeVoe, one of the things she constantly tells me, and she's like, I love your directness, I love your fierceness, and I love the practice you have with integrity. One of the things I was accountable to, and I think that's why I responded the way that I did too, was that direct honesty without compassion can be received and perceived as meanness. You have to be with whether or not you are willing to have a smaller community of people who will understand a person like you, right? Because listen, everybody say they're healers and divine this and they practicing and all that. But listen, I'm a person who will tell you that to be in space with other humans and to be in right relationship to your values is a superpower, okay? Because everybody trying to impress everybody and be likable and all that. I do not care if you like me. I do care that I treat you with the same respect I require. I like that a lot too. That tree reference was it. If you try and get me to understand something, use plants and trees and stuff, because that's how I rock. Thank you so much, Anyangwu. And I hope that we can connect after this, because I like you as a person. I don't know you very much, but my wife knows you and she loves you very deeply. Yes, and I appreciate that. One of the things that I'm gonna be honest, I'm probably a softie. And you know, I'm tough around my boundaries and things like that, but I'm so tender. I feel like I try to offer compassion beyond my boundaries sometimes. And that's hard, you know what I'm saying? Because when I was in that deep anger place, and I'm still engaging with and in conversation with, I don't want to be like, I'm cured. It don't work like that, y'all. Okay. If it was a part of you at one time, or you responded to it at one time from trauma or whatever, it's still there. Okay. That's not how anything works. Nobody's cured of anything they've ever done. It don't work like that. There's no finite healing. My mom said transformation and healing are lifetime journeys. Okay. So as I'm thinking about all of this, I'm like, I really do. My wife always says like move at the speed of trust with people first. And you just like, when I first heard that, my wife is the most compassionate. I don't know if y'all know Adrienne Marie Brown, but she is the most compassionate, like deeply loving. She lives the book Emergent Strategy. She lives it. Okay. Pleasure activist. This is how she lives. And I see her in active practice in our home. And one of the things that matters so much to me is like being able to like also offer compassion and not solely be the evidence of how people have already tried to statically map me out as like, oh, you went through this, this, and this. Oh, I know it's possible that you could cause these harms. The things that you've been through do not dictate the possibilities for your change, for healing, right? That's not, like we recognize and are accountable to those residual things, because if a person experiences a particular kind of trauma, they didn't, or conditions, right? They didn't create those conditions, just like we didn't create these systems. We are accountable to how we show up and respond, the choices we make inside that. So when I'm angry, I got to know what medicine I need. Slow meadow, right? I'm putting on some slow meadow and I'm gonna sit still, okay? I'm gonna call, my friends. That's why I'm like, villages are important. People who only have friends on social media, red flag. People who do not have a strong village of people that they can at least like connect with for accountability, you know what I'm saying? Red flag. I want us all to know that we have to be in the practice of belonging as much as we recognize our entitlement to community. All right. So when I'm navigating that anger piece, it's serious. And I think somebody brought that up too. And I want to make sure that I touch on that. Anger is such a necessary emotion. It's so necessary, right? I do not condemn anger. I do not condemn people who practice inside anger, okay? Because it is a normal human response, okay? Especially given the conditions, right? How do you not be angry at white supremacy? I would love somebody to raise their hand and tell me how you do that. How do you not be angry with what's happening to the earth? Okay, I don't know if y'all noticed this turtle earring, this turtle necklace, but I do not like what's happening to turtles. I got a turtle here at my house, okay? Like the relationship we have to the things that we don't even pay attention to, like animals, right? Like plants, okay? These are all power dynamics. These are all ways that we can be accountable to other living things. Like I saw somebody talking about like what they was watering their plants. Yes, that's a power dynamic. Them plants can't water themselves and you brought them inside. Okay, so go water them plants. So being mindful that living things, if we do invite them into our space, whether it be human, animal, plant, whatever, we're responsible for the care we provide in that space too. We're accountable to the care that we provide in that space. Come on, little doggy. I see you on Yamu and all y'all. And I see Caprice holding this dog sleep. I've never seen this in my life before, but I love this so much, okay? And regarding the anger piece, it's so hard with anger and masculinity too, because we are kind of oriented to pathologize masculinity because it's supposed to be violently angry, right? Like we're like, oh, well, he just, that's a this, so that's this type of person, what you expect. I expect that your strength is also connected to the strength you have in your dignity, in your understanding of yourself. Everybody know themselves until they don't know how to manage their feelings or how they treat other people in the midst of their feelings. Like, that's what I mean by that right relationship. It is a holistic relationship between you and everything you connect with. All right. I think that's important. That's an important knowing. And I want to be in community with people who also have that knowing. That's why I don't got that many friends, y'all. It's hard to have accountable people who are friends. Because if something happened, I want you to be able to tell me. I don't want to see it on Twitter first. I'm sorry. I do not want to see it on Instagram first, baby. I do not want to see it. If I do see it, me and you got a relationship issue. It's a community breakdown, okay? Because what we are supposed to be recognizing in the midst of our relationship is we orient to what justice means here, okay? We orient and create together how we love and care for each other. When you let strangers and other people infiltrate that space, no ma'am, no sir, no ham, no burger, okay? Because it is a breakdown in community and in our relationship, okay? And that's when the safety and the trust and all that is defeated, because you rather have more power, right? You rather have more control than to be in the discomfort with me of fixing the relationship. Now, I'm talking about non-egregious harms, y'all. Don't be talking about, oh, rape. I know how people be doing, okay? That's why I got that message on Instagram. I'm talking about things that do not require certain action. I expect that my friends, in my life, I'm speaking about me, I expect that my friends will reach out to me to connect about anything that happens between us. If I don't respond and you keep trying to hit me about that thing, call me out. Go ahead. I gave you the ticket to post me and I didn't want to I was trying to hide from the fact I smacked you in the back of the head. Call me out. Because I didn't meet you where I needed to meet you. And now you had no choice because you need help. You need support at this time. So I want us to be mindful of how we hold each other inside of what a relationship means, okay? Angry or not angry, feeling hurt or not hurt. We are accountable to the way that we practice in our feelings at all times. So anger is a form of expression. Thank you, Angie, again. That's Professor Angie right there. I only use Professor Nalo because I don't do Miss or Mr. things. But my PhD is not finished yet. So don't beat me up, y'all. Because they dragged me on Twitter about this professor thing, but it's all good. I want to make sure that I leave some room. I saw another hand, and I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the chat, which I'm going to pick up. Yes, absolutely. And I'm so thankful to you, FCHES, for even speaking to that, because it is important that we kind of orient to the reality of that. I feel like when privilege as language is connected to a particular thing, then we get uneasy a little bit about how we orient to that particular group of people also experiencing harm, right? We don't want to hear about the harm because the privilege supersedes our ability to see them as also a harmed population, right? So we talk a little bit about masculine privilege and like what that means, and how we're perceived and what that means in justice and how we see ourselves and how we're supposed to carry this language, right? The reclamation of this language means that we are also like bearing the impacts of patriarchy's head start, okay? Because this orientation to our masculinity, though not new in like humans, like humans have been masculine since the beginning of time, or at least engaged in that energy. But what we've done is we've shaped around that what the imagery is, how you're supposed to dress, what you're supposed to look like, how you're supposed to talk. If your voice too high, then you ain't masculine enough. All the different things that we use to create those control narratives, which are really connected to that abuse of power, that patriarchy. I think I would say the self-love piece is like, it's a never-ending journey, family. Like people, it just is a never-ending journey. And like, I'm willing to be in community with you as someone who I'm like, yo, we need people. I'm just being real. That's why I had to tell Anyanwu right there. I'm like, Anyanwu, we need to be in village. Because when you connect with a person or when you recognize a person to be of similar or like energy to you or whatever, like that really does help reinforce and support the moments where I can't stand myself, right? Or I'm struggling with like how to practice the full freedom of who I am today, right? Because it's a day-to-day thing. It ain't like, once a month I feel like, no, I look in the mirror and sometimes be like, what if it is a Jesus who's gonna send me to hell? What, you know what I'm saying? So like a part of loving myself is also putting the things in place that support a person like me, right? So, and that's not always easy either, because I got all these turtles on me because I am a turtle. I could work a room. I love this and being here. And also When I'm in the house, I'm in the house. I'm very deeply homebody type of person. So what self-love looks like to me and what support looks like to me is varying, right? And I think community is a huge part of it. So finding your tribe, your people that you want to be accountable to, that feel like home to you. And that's a journey, because I probably got 5 friends over the past 10 years that I'm like, these my friends. You know, I got colleagues and acquaintances, but my friends, you got this many. I can name on this one hand, okay? Because it'd be like that. You just can't be telling all your business and secrets and everything to everybody. But the people who you want to know you, the people who you want to be accountable to, and they to you, the people you can trust to be part of that village, I think is the first step to like supporting us in this world that we live in. Because there's no real solid answer for how to solve the impact of these violences on us, right? And that's the part that like even I as a practitioner and scholar and facilitator of all these things, you'd be surprised with some of the stuff I get. And so I think it takes that community. It does also take like the practice of getting to know yourself. Like you are the only data you need. I know I said that at the beginning. You are the only data you need, okay, to understand masculinity. You don't need no commercial. You don't need the NFL. You don't need a man. You don't need other masculine people who wear suits. You don't need me, okay? What you need is to get, I'm saying this for me, because what I needed also, because I can only speak from the data of my own lived experience, you know, I'm not no expert or no fortune teller or none of that, but I'm very mindful of the fact that I, as a person, had to really get to know myself and what I think of things and who I want to be in the world. You know what I'm saying? That's how I got really wrapped up in this accountability talk, this justice talk, this reclaiming masculinity talk. Because I'm like, I know you ain't talking about masculinity, because then you talk about me. And now I'm in the conversation, right? Now I'm part of how you about to orient to these issues or this thing. You're not about to tell me that I don't experience harm. You're not about to tell me that I'm benefiting from a system that was not made with me in mind, it was made with men in mind, okay? How do I orient myself to the overlap that I face when a person is like, you masculine because you wear men's suits and you blah, 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 so you experience some privilege. I want someone who is expansive enough to hold the both and of both those impacts. I'm a human being, I am masculine. You can't do nothing about that. Are you or are you not in relationship to me? Okay. Have you experienced me as violent? Because I be wanting to know, if you gonna call me violent, I want to know what it is and I want to know how to make it right. So when we are talking about masculinity and how to be in relationship with each other, how to care for each other, the part that I'm so still curious about is the things that we can't control, which is how people see us, how people treat us, how we, you know, how we orient to any of this that we're navigating through. And I'm just, you know, for me, I probably don't, that might not even be an effective answer, but I want you to know that I care about you. And if you need community, you know what I'm saying? Please get in touch with me. You know what I'm saying? I would love to be in relationship with you if that's something that you also want or need. And I'm happy to share space with anyone who's also engaging with these ideas or these struggles, because it is hard, yo. It's hard, especially as a trans person. So I wanna send some love to you for sure. And thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably today. Really, I honor that in you. I got your message, Tran. I'm sorry about that. I didn't even see the time. 2:51, y'all. We did it, y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and get out the way so Neonu can take the floor. Thank y'all so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So why I was hitting Nalo up like crazy, like I need some time at the end, and partly it is to have some space to appreciate you before you leave. So I would love if folks really, like, not just applause. I mean, applause is wonderful. Applause is wonderful. I was a performance major in college, and I know performance is really nice, but sometimes just like reflecting and saying that thing out that has happened in this space that Nalo has held for us and brought. And I mainly would invite you to put that in the chat, but also would welcome a couple of voices in the room. Not long, because we don't have long, but if there's some words that you'd love to offer. Since you got raised up in the church, Nalo, this is the point where after the presentation and the response of the church, this is the response of the church to the message. So what would you say?
Accountability too. Let me know. I enjoyed this space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing some beautiful things in the chat. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. I'm a vessel, and I'm so thankful that these ideas are being expanded and have my attention, and y'all carry them in curiosity everywhere else. You're more than welcome to use anything here in your own and knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's possible for us to do one of those like really messy, like everybody unmutes and just shouts a little bit? Like I'm feeling so much energy like in the core of my spirit, and I would love, I don't know if there's space for that.
Yeah, what do you mean? Better.
Thank you.
So good. Yes. Ashe, ashe, ashe.
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 Wow, thank y'all so much. It's, I'm definitely cry when I leave this call. And
breathe it in, Nalo. Breathe it in.
Listen, I've been so full. This is the best event yet. I can't even tell y'all. This is one of the most amazing things I've done. This is the first time that I fearlessly came into some of these ideas that I was probably scared to speak to before. And this is my most vulnerable I've ever been. Christiana, that baby gorgeous. And just like, you know, I want y'all to know, I don't know personally, but as community, I'm sending a lot of love to each of you. And I hope that we meet again in some other space. Really.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Love you.
Oh, last, I'm gonna put some contact stuff in the chat in case anybody wants to connect with me on social media or get in touch, or if y'all know some masculine workshops I should attend, holla at me. Thank y'all.
Yes. Yeah, this is a precious circle. And when I was speaking to Nalo during the lunch break, just real quick, and I've had this experience many times, I try to describe a deeper change form to folks ahead of time. I'm like, no, it's a little different. The quality of holding that's here, and I just think it just comes partly from years, but who responds to showing up. You know, I'm a musician, so I always say, if you play an A on the piano over there, the A on the guitar in the corner is going to vibrate. And so people vibrate and they feel the frequency. And so from the moment I first spoke to you on the phone, Nalo, your response, and that's why I wrote in the chat, I love your tenderness, because right away there was not those kind of walls that can be like with, oh, I'm bringing you in as a speaker and you're responding from that place. You were just like right real, right heart, right understanding, right from the door. And that makes all the difference in the spaces that you create. So we honor you and everyone that has shown up. My biggest frustration sometime is that I just want to sit down at the table now with you. I want to be like, okay, for the next 2 hours, let's just sit down and share like what was coming up for us and your own story, your own vulnerability.
We can definitely do this again anytime.
Yeah, absolute. So the next 2 Deeper Change forums are coming up, and we're trying to be back in person for the first time in April. And we'll see whether or not, let's see if this actually comes up. Nope, that's not what I wanted to share. Are you looking at Neoni?
We just see Neona has started sharing. We saw nothing.
It was not my what I wanted to show, but our next presentation is going to be on April 7th with Winona LaDuke, economist, environmentalist, activist, and we're going to be in person back at the Whitneyville Cultural Commons and also streaming out. So we'll see how that works to stream for folks that are out of town. It's been part of the beauty of being on Zoom is that we have folks from around the country right now with us. So we hope to see you then. And thank you to this amazing team of folks that held all the back door. Jill, we rarely get to see Jill, but Jill did all the registrations and does all that amazing work.
Woo! Woo!
Jill!
Shout out to the team. We don't forget the team out here. Let's give everybody come off mute. Shout out this team who put this together.
Thank you, team. We love you. Appreciate it.
Yes.
So you'll be hearing from us soon. Please give feedback. We're always trying to see if we can hold spaces in ways that are as inclusive of all the needs as possible and voices. So just loving you and thank you. Thank you so much. Carrie, thank you. I want to just highlight Carrie because Carrie behind the scenes person. Woo! Carrie be making those connections. Carrie, come on, Carrie!
I want to shout out Nalo. I just want to shout out your page, the Black Girl Masculine page. Nalo has an amazing series up there called Reimagining Black Masculine Futures. That's a lot of how I got introduced to Nalo. So y'all should go to Black Girl Masculine page on Instagram if you have Instagram and check out that IG series. It's on. You can log on and see all the different presenters Nalo had. That was an amazing series. And
we got May, second week of May, we got another one coming. I might have to pull Yanwu at the last minute.
Yes. All right. But I want you to notice how Carrie interrupted her applause to point back to Nalo. That's what Carrie does. Yes, so we love you, Carrie. We see you, Carrie. You are true. So have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Much love. I'm going to stay on. Nalo, we could do a little debrief really quick. Yay, team.
Much love, y'all. Thank you, everybody. Much love to you, Nalo.
Thank you.
I'm going to be in touch. Yanwu, for real.
Love y'all. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Y'all have a great one.
Yes.